Thanks for logging on to MyFoxHurricane.com. So we are now watching Tropical Storm Fiona. You're seeing some pretty strong convection with this. Right there, you see that big flare up, the deep colors, those reds and magentas. And at first glance, this looks like a very well-defined system. And it is getting stronger. It is getting a little bit better defined, but it still has some issues. Now, you can really see this when we kind of look at some of the visible satellite imagery with this. You can start to get that better idea of exactly what's going on with this, because here's the center right here. All that deep convection is all sitting on that eastern side of the storm. So that is that strong wind shear that is still an issue for this system, just kind of displacing or making that storm more lopsided. You can almost think of it, it's leaning to one side. That's what's actually happening with this right now. So given that, it's really pretty impressive that it is strengthened as much as it has, since that center is really sitting over here. And it looks like for the time being, that wind shear is going to continue to be an issue. So yeah, we'll probably see maybe a little bit more strengthening, just because that has been the trend with this system. It has somehow found a way to overcome that, because it's gotten rid of a lot of that dry air that was an issue with it. It's kind of walled itself off. So it does look like maybe a little bit more strengthening, but you're not going to see that big ramp up in intensity. In fact, you look on that northern and northwestern side, that's where that strong wind shear is. Remember, that center is actually sitting over here. So it just kind of blows the top right off the storm, or at least pushes it over onto one side. And you notice that, remember, that forecast track is basically going in this direction. So it's going to continue to be dealing with some of this stronger wind shear as we go through really the next several days. But in its favor, we've got warm water. In fact, once it gets over into the Caribbean and over into this area, you see the darker colors, more of those purple shades, water gets even warmer. So there is plenty of energy to work with. It just has that dry, or the wind shear that it has to deal with over at least the next few days. Maybe towards the first part of next week, it looks like that wind shear might start to become less of an issue. But here's the 11 a.m. advisory right now. Top winds are at 50 miles an hour. It's moving right now to the west at 14 miles an hour. So a pretty good clip. And again, notice all that deep convection. There's the icon right there, sitting on that western side of the storm. So we do have watches and some warnings that have been issued across portions of the islands. And that idea is it will just continue on that westerly track over the next several days. Then it's always that question. And when it's making that turn, when is it exactly going to make that turn? And once again, here we are really trying to focus and fine tune that turn of the system, because we've got this ridge which is to the north, and that will continue to steer it. But eventually that ridge, it starts to weaken a little bit. It gets a little bit of a weaker. It gets on the edge of it, which is going to allow it to turn more in that northerly direction. So the big key is, where does it make that turn? Because if it makes it later, it's heading over the Dominican Republic, over Hispaniola. If it makes it earlier, it can actually work its way onto the north even earlier than what is forecasted. But you notice, as far as those wind speeds, it gets a little bit stronger, up to about 60 miles an hour, but you're not seeing any significant increase in that speed until we start to get up into this area, up into the Atlantic. That's where we expect to see that wind shear starting to really lessen and getting into some open waters where it will have that chance of increasing in intensity. So here's the Fox model as far as those wind speeds and that track. There you see it working its way towards the islands. Here we are Friday evening, still approaching the islands, working its way towards the Caribbean, works its way into the Caribbean. Looks like at this point heading just to the south of Puerto Rico. So they will be dealing with the very strong winds and a lot of rain moving over the island as we head through the weekend. This is on Sunday afternoon, late afternoon, heading into the evening. We're always talking about the GFS, the European. What are they saying? You look for that consensus between the two models. And what you're seeing is kind of a big split here, because you've got the GFS weakening that ridge quicker, turns it to the north sooner, and then the European in white is taking it a bit further to the south and holding that ridge a bit longer. So you see the end result. They both eventually turn to the north and the northwest, but it's a big question of where it makes that, because Obviously, if we had a solution, something more like the European, that could become even more of a concern for Florida. Now, at this point, you're seeing that big divergence. I'm not going to focus in on any one of these tracks. Still way too early to do that. It's probably somewhere in the middle here, but what you're looking for is that consensus between the two models, or at least more of the models, to really get that confidence of what's going on. And right now, we've got a big spread in the various computer models. So that tells you something like this here, there's still low confidence on exactly what is going to happen. That means we just got to kind of wait and see and fine tune this over the next several days. Of course, we're going to keep you updated right here on MyFoxHurricane.com.